Hello, greetings. Father Murr, good to see you.
Good afternoon, Robert. Good to see you.
I'm actually in a car in the streets of Rome, Italy, and I know you're sitting in a beautiful library in southern Spain.
I am, and we're just today we're plowing fields, getting ready to plant wheat. It's
Wonderful.
fun. It's beautiful.
All right, I'm helping someone move some bags across the city. I was caught in traffic. It's a rainy day, and I'm in the car doing this podcast.
Caught in traffic in
Today,
Rome, I can hardly believe it.
yeah, I, I'm used to it by now, and in a certain sense, there's a thrill to it. The Italians seem to be at every instant about to crash into each other and into you, but they seem to have much better reflexes than in America, so that if you don't look back and just look ahead, they don't hit you.
That's
So
right.
long as,
That's right. All of
so
them have
long as,
learned to. All of them have learned how to drive in chaos. So they're
yeah,
pretty good. Yeah.
yeah. If they have lanes in the traffic, they don't follow them.
No, no, no. They just get in the. I think they're there for decoration, for ornamentation.
Yeah. So it's October 23rd, 2024, a Wednesday. A lot of things are happening. I've been here for several weeks covering the synod. Every day, people are coming to press briefings. Today, there was Cardinal Prevost Robert, who is an American, but he spent most of his ecclesiastical career in Peru, where he
Hmm.
became a bishop. And he is now the head of the Congregation for Bishops. And he's the man, finally, upon whose desk the bishop choices come and are made. And he talked in the briefing today about how he chooses bishops. And he said the two main criteria: first, that they be men of faith and prayer. They want to be kind of solid and rock like to be the leaders of a diocese, the leading guide of a shepherd of a diocese. But at the same time, they want them to be uh, a wide ranging abilities to engage every person in the diocese, from the rich and engage the rich to the poor, and be engaging the poor and charitable to the poor, and to be able to deal with the currents of the church and of society in the diocese, and to be good administrators. So that's a pretty difficult uh, picture to fulfill, but they try to judge these men and try to choose the best they can, according to him.
Well, I'm going to leave that one alone.
All
That's
right.
very good. I'm glad they've got. I'm glad they've got such high criteria. That would be wonderful. If they follow it, that's great. That's even better.
Okay. And what about you? Do you think you'll be coming up to become a bishop?
I wouldn't hold my breath, Robert. I wouldn't hold my
No.
breath. No, no,
Yeah.
that would never happen because I enjoy having an opinion. I really enjoy having an opinion. I enjoy being on this program with you. I enjoy being on other programs. I enjoy being able to speak my mind. And if you're a bishop, you really can't speak your mind. I don't mean that as a criticism. It's sort of I don't know if you're the head of a university, if you're governor of a state, there are things you can opine on and things that you cannot. You have to reserve them. And I don't like that reservation thing. I like being open and airing viewpoints and discussing matters that are important and see if we can get to some sort of an understanding on things. No, I wouldn't. I would not be. I'm not good bishop material at all. At all. Not at all.
You know, well,
Nope.
I'm going to contest that, because somehow the fundamental character is leadership and is the ability to grapple with reality and to speak the truth boldly. And I would say that if a bishop can't speak the truth boldly and isn't free to do so, how can he really be a good evangelist and a good teacher? This description that you just gave would lead us to having a very pale and weak and ineffective leadership unless we have bold people who speak freely like yourself.
Well, but I mean, I think in great part that's exactly what we do have. I think we're in a crisis of leadership today, really do. But I'll tell you something. There's another reason for which I would be a bad candidate, even a possible candidate. I'm going to be 75 next year. You'd have me for a bishop for 8 months. That wouldn't work.
Oh,
You see that?
well,
I know. I know. I look. In my late 20s, early 30s, but
okay. All right.
yeah.
Well, speaking of being outspoken, um, we do have one outspoken bishop. However, he's now excommunicated, Archbishop Carlo Maria Viganò. And he has written an open letter to the American Catholic public, and he's talked about the upcoming election. And so this is the view of the American elections from a career Vatican diplomat, very well informed, who is now excommunicated. But all the more reason, I think, because he speaks, as you were putting it, with clarity and without being under any restriction. He speaks his
Hmm.
mind. Would you be interested in going through this open letter together today?
I'd love to do that. I first of all, I've got to publicly admit my great admiration for Archbishop Viganò. I think he's a wonderful man. I think he's got great opinions, and what I love most about him is he lacks fear to express those opinions. Also, something that I think is remarkable today in today's church. This man is incredibly in love with the church. He's incredibly in love with the church. He suffers for the church. He wants things put back together. He wants a unity established in the church. And I think that's why, excommunicated or not, he hasn't lost any followers, and he's picked up quite a few. So I think he's a great voice to listen to, regardless of
Okay.
excommunication. That's my opinion.
Okay. And we also have a secular matter, in a sense, a matter not of the faith. So everybody has a right to speak. Doesn't have to be
Right.
the opinion. Right. So Archbishop Carlo Maria Viganò, open letter to American Catholics on the eve of the 2024 presidential election. Some people are calling it a selection. I'm not sure how much we can trust in this election, Father Murr.
I think it's going to be not so close. I don't think it's going to be a close call this time. I think there's going to be enough of a margin between the two main candidates that cheating is going to be out of the question. I hope so. Anyway,
All right. And just since we're going towards the election, it's the 23rd of October. The election is the 5th of November. So
it is.
we are now what is it? It's 12 days away. It'll be that Tuesday, 1 week and 6 days from now. So
And a
uh,
group of Americans who are living here made sure that all of our ballots are in registered mail and mailed already on their way. That's good.
all right. So
People are
there'll
people
be
are people are very serious about this election, Robert. Have you noticed that? This isn't
yeah.
like any other election in my lifetime, anyway.
Okay. The Archbishop, who is 83 years old, he'll turn 84 in January, and he opens with a quote from G.K. Chesterton called, well, the book is called Heretics, written over 100 years ago, 1905. And the quote is, "The great march of mental destruction will go on. Everything will be denied.
Mhm.
Fires will be kindled to testify that 2 and 2 make 4. Swords will be drawn to prove that leaves are green in summer. What he's
Leave it to Chesterton. I love him. I love him.
he's amazing. He was built a little
Yeah.
bit like you, Father.
Well, I'm following in his example. Yes.
There you go. Dear faithful American Catholics, the Archbishop writes, I'm addressing all of you a few days before the presidential election that will call millions of American citizens to the polls. And when I'm reading, we can stop, Father, and you just break in and say, let's interpret this, or
Sure.
uh,
Sure.
even in conditions of
Clarify it a little bit. Yes.
yeah, even in conditions of relative normality, the exercise of the vote is your moral duty, through which you cooperate in the first person in choosing the person who will lead the nation for the next 4 years. But in this coming electoral round, just as in 2020, and indeed much more so, you are not simply called to choose between 2 candidates who happen to be on different political sides, but who both nevertheless have the common good at heart in compliance with the Constitution and the law. No. In this election, you must choose between 2 radically opposed ways of conceiving the government of your nation. You are called to choose between democracy and dictatorship, between freedom and slavery. Father Murr.
Yeah, I believe that. I believe one of the parties, I'm not going to mention which one. I think one of the parties is open, is looking for honesty and openness and transparency. Although the other one is the party that claims it, right? And I find another party, one of the two, more espoused to Marxism, which is atheistic in nature, has to be to function the way it's supposed to, and morally insipid, and also a dictatorship. I find leftist politics always are lined up with dictatorships. You know, it's funny. We call, if we look at a conservative, whether it be politically a political conservative or a religious conservative, any kind of conservative, people have a tendency to, if they don't like that person, to compare him to Hitler, to Stalin, to Mussolini. And I've always found it very curious that people fail to realize that those three they were great dictators, were all leftists. They were not conservatives. They were out and out liberals, liberal reform, liberal everything, chuck everything that existed and find a new path toward everything. So I find the left dictatorial. I do.
Okay, the 2 things that come to mind with regard to chucking everything. Mussolini, when he marched on Rome in 1922 with the fascist black shirts, he said, from now on, this won't be called 1922. It'll be called year 1 of the fascist era. So he was trying to start everything over again and return to the glories of ancient Rome. The second thing that I'm impressed by is a few weeks ago, a man who most of his life was a Democrat and then became an independent to run for president, Robert Kennedy Jr., whose father was Robert Kennedy, who was running for president in 1968. When I was a boy, I remember he was shot in California June 6th after he won the California primary. And
yes, I remember well.
And so this man was only, I think, 5 or 6 years old at the time, maybe 7. But his father was killed with a bullet in the head, and his uncle, John Kennedy, was also killed with a bullet in his head in 1963, which I also remember as a little boy. And a guy is tooting his horn so that I moved my car here. Because I've
Well,
talked.
just don't move. Just don't move. Let him toot.
All right.
Yeah,
Here we go.
that takes care of that problem.
All right. Okay. So I'm helping someone move some boxes here, and in a rainy day in Rome, I'm parked here. He's loaded the car up, and we'll be leaving after the podcast. Bob is getting some road rage. Yeah, the guy was tooting
Roman
on me.
road, Roman road
Well,
rage.
I'm actually in the second lane here. Uh, anyway, I'm parked, and the guy I happened to be parking next to wanted to get out.
Well, there you
So,
go. Okay, well, you did a good deed then. Good.
okay, so Robert Kennedy Jr. gave a talk about 4 weeks ago. He said, "I'm turning all my votes over to Donald Trump,"
Right.
and he said because the Democratic Party is no longer the party it was for my father and for my uncle. And he said the key thing is they become totalitarian. They
Yes.
don't listen to ideas. They have preset ideas. They don't debate them. They just try to impose them. Very ideological. And I'm not saying it, and even you're not saying it, nor is Archbishop Viganò saying it. It's Bobby Kennedy Jr. who's saying Democrats have become
However, it
totalitarian.
was the point I was trying to make just a moment ago. It's just that's the way it is. Yes.
Right. Okay.
Robert, I don't know about your family, but my entire family, there wasn't a Republican among them. It would be a shame to be a Republican when I was growing up. You were a Democrat. And if you were Catholic, you were a Democrat. There was no question about it. Today, it's exactly the reverse. In my family, anyway.
So let's return to the Archbishop's letter.
Let's.
And see. Matt is producing the show here. And there we go. Thanks, Matt. So he's making it very stark here, black and white, freedom and slavery, democracy and dictatorship. And we've just talked about how some other people seem also to agree, like Bobby Kennedy Jr. On one side, we have candidate Donald J. Trump, who, despite serious problems in his positions, okay, which is what a lot of Catholics do say, especially in the matter of abortion and assisted procreation, that's in vitro procreation, has as his objective the common good and the protection of the fundamental freedoms of citizens. In Donald Trump's America, every Catholic can practice their faith, educate their children in it without interference from the state. On the other side, we have a candidate and a party that promotes everything that directly opposes the faith and morals of the Catholic Church. In Kamala Harris's America, Catholics, but also Protestants, are considered fundamentalists to be marginalized and eliminated. And their children are considered the property of the state, which arrogates to itself the right to lead them astray from an early age in both body and soul. Trump's America can become great and prosperous again. Harris's America is destined for invasion and for moral, social, and economic destruction, the most ferocious dictatorship. Father Murr.
What's to discuss on that? I agree completely. There's not a word I would debate. Absolutely.
Okay, and if some viewers and have some comments to make, please put them in. We'll, from time to time, take them up. Let's move on with this letter. I don't want to run out of time and not go through the whole letter. This is Archbishop Viganò. We're reading his letter, Open Letter to Americans, published yesterday, October 22nd. Today's October 23rd. He says, "Look at your country. Your cities have become dumps, filled with derelicts and criminals, drug dealers and addicts, prostitutes and robbers. Your schools are dens of indoctrination." It's a question about our public schools. "And corruption from kindergarten onwards. In your courts, criminals are acquitted and innocents are imprisoned. New ideological crimes are prosecuted, while illegality is tolerated and encouraged. In your hospitals, In your hospitals, multinational corporations rule, and you are their guinea pigs to be exterminated or made chronically ill so that you will be their perpetual clients." Pretty strong words there. It is true our medical system has started to frighten us in some ways. 10, 20, 30 years ago, we would have said the men in the white coats are always people we trust, and we know they're going to give us the best medicine, the best advice we have for our health. But we started to doubt that, apparently.
No longer, right.
Right, because I think money has come into it. They'll give us the solution that somehow the big companies persuade them to offer to us. We've all started to doubt it's their personal best judgment. We started to feel some monetary corruption has entered in, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me just tell a quick story, Robert. I knew a woman who was the secretary of a little company way back in, I guess, in the 30s, 40s. Worked out of a garage in Brooklyn, and that woman, the company was so poor at that time, she had to take a lot of her pay in stock of the company. Well, the company in the 1950s began to make birth control pills, the famous birth control pill. And she spoke to a Jesuit confessor at the time, and he said, "You can have nothing to do with a company like that. There's something wrong, and eventually you'll see what's wrong." Well, she left. She cashed in all of her ownings, or her stocks and bonds in the company, or bonds or stocks of it, and she made out quite well. She helped build a part of our orphanage in Mexico. The company was called Pfizer. But anyway, that's exactly what happened. A lot of people found that the direction that the big drug companies were going in from the very beginning wrong, and now we see it. I think anybody can see that they're much more concerned with money than they are general health.
Hello, Father Murr. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hello.
I think Robert is. There he goes.
Okay, there's Bob. I was worried we'd lost him. Okay.
You know what happened? I got a phone call that came into my cell phone and therefore knocked out my internet momentarily, on which I'm using this computer, which I'm sitting in the driver's seat with the computer on my lap. Anyway, so just the right and wrong, which are the ultimate paths to destruction and misery or blessedness, have been set aside in our society, and this is leading us to this situation. And the Archbishop is trying to remind us here. And he goes on to talk about other elements in society. He says, farmers, ranchers, and fishermen are persecuted and forced to fail, while the land is grabbed by unscrupulous corporations who transform it into endless photovoltaic systems and wind turbines to power their data centers and server farms, where they collect all your data, your movements, your purchases, and your political preferences. So he's giving a wide vision here of the maladies of our modern economy. They have gone so far as to tamper with the climate. This is something a lot of people are wondering about with these hurricanes and Western North Carolina. They've gone so far as to tamper with the climate by means of sophisticated geoengineering operations and devastating arson. I think he may be referring to Hawaii, in order to make the global warming fraud credible and impose the green transition, the increase in the cost.
Yeah, he could also be referring to California.
Those wildfires.
Yeah.
Well,
because they decided they're going to control things by not controlling things. Anyway.
Yes, and so we all realize that when we speak of they, we start to sound conspiratorial, and yet without shutting off our reasoning capacities, we have to ask, who is making some of these decisions? Who are the they that really have the access to some of this technology, which often through the military has started to really have a lot of power and the ability to influence various things. And is it being used? So we really are simply asking for truth. We're not inventing.
Yes.
We have, yeah. We're not just maniacally spinning conspiratorial
And
conspiracies.
Some of this, Robert, is the governing the governing political parties in particular states. Other part of it is what many politicians and church leaders have called the deep state. Right? And it's not really a conspiracy at all. I mean, it may have been a conspiracy some years ago. Today, it's becoming more and more evident,
Yeah,
and there's more evidence to make clearly what it is. Yeah.
yeah. And okay, let's go back to the text and work our way through it. Um, but he's essentially looking over the whole society and looking at this election in that context. They have gone so far as to tamper with the climate by means of sophisticated geoengineering operations and devastating arson. In order to make the global warming fraud credible and impose the green transition, the increase in the cost of energy, and electric cars and scooters. And all this is done based on evidence that consists of lies without any scientific proof, but which are propagated through the servile collaboration of the regime media, ever ready to label any dissenters as conspiracy theorists. But what until yesterday was dismissed as the result of conspiracy theories is now admitted by the government itself. Now let's see what he's going to say here. They take away your sunlight. They poison you by seeding the clouds. They overwhelm your villages and your fields with deadly hurricanes. They kill your livestock and dry up your crops with induced droughts and devastating fires. They aim to control the entire food sector, to force you to eat only what they make available to you. This is what the Agenda 2030 calls for. So he's saying there's actually an agenda that's published called Agenda 2030, which calls for these types of controls so that the society is planned. It's a planned society. This is what the Agenda 2030 calls for, which has been imposed without any vote by the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. The UN, based in New York City, and the World Economic Forum, which is based, I believe, in Switzerland. That's the
Yes.
forum headed by Klaus Schwab. In these 4 disastrous years of the Biden-Harris administration, that's Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been in since the 2020 election, which was thought by many people to be in some way questionable. But since then, we have had a puppet in the White House and a corrupt and incompetent vice president who has never stopped lying and deceiving voters about her past and her future. Pretty harsh words. Power is managed by the criminal deep state.
Pretty harsh words, but are they true? Yes. Yeah.
Okay, there was some things that she said she did that she didn't do, etc. But we don't have to go too deeply into that. We can just say power is managed by the criminal deep state. This is the word you just used a minute ago, Father, whose names and faces
Yes.
we now know, that is responsible for the destruction of your great nation. So this is an Italian archbishop who was nuncio in America telling us that we've had some people running things, powerful people, who are somehow destroying the nation. And to ensure that the crisis is endless.
This also, Robert, if I may interject here, is the same archbishop who talked about the deep church.
Okay, that's
saying
right.
this is the same, that we have a parallel ill running through Catholicism, and I think I would agree with them in both.
I think we'll have to come back to that as we look next week at whatever comes out of this synod. But yes, deep state, and deep church. To ensure the crisis is endless, new war scenarios are continually opening up in conflicts that no one actually wants, except for those who make enormous profits from them, sacrificing human lives and compromising international stability. You have seen what the Democrats, that is, the woke far left, have been capable of in 4 years. Imagine what they will be able to do if, instead of Biden's numerous stand-ins, his vice president is elected. In the most scandalous and unimaginable fraud, with her entourage of LGBTQ plus ministers, rigorously woke, sold out to China or to the World Economic Forum, sponsored by George Soros or Bill Gates, manipulated by Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. So that's a pretty harsh indictment of the group, the leadership group around the Democratic candidate Kamala Harris. At that point, dear
He's certainly not ambiguous, is he?
At that point, dear American Catholics, you will not only have to go to a different rally, as Kamala would like. I think there was some pro-life people with placards up, and she said, "You're at the wrong rally."
Yes.
Right? Oh no.
Yes.
Oh, here it is.
You guys are at the wrong rally.
Anti-Christian rhetoric and anti-Christian approach to public policy. I don't think that we've, that's right, Jesus is king, and I don't think that we've seen.
Well, then we have two different pictures. Let's try. I don't want to not get through this text, so let's go back. And that was a nice clip, though, that gave a very we illustrated the two different views. In order to say Christ is the Lord, because saying that will be considered hate speech and praying in front of an abortion clinic an act of terrorism. Do not think that these are remote hypotheses. Wherever the woke left takes power, it establishes the most vicious, anti-human, and anti-Christian dictatorship that humanity has ever known. And we know that every time the left has come to power, it has never left through democratic means. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, the Archbishop continues, we are not talking about two visions that are a bit different, but still part of the normal political back and forth. No, we're talking about two diametrically opposed and irreconcilable worlds, in which Trump fights against the deep state and is committed to freeing America from its tentacled grip, while on the opposite side we have a corrupt and blackmailed candidate, an organic part of the deep state, who acts as a puppet in the hands of warmongers like Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, of self-proclaimed so-called philanthropists like the criminals George Soros and Klaus Schwab, or of characters like Jeffrey Epstein and Sean Combs. I actually don't even know who Sean Combs is, but the Archbishop is here pulling no punches, giving us a very, very clear picture of his analysis of our present crisis. Their program is that of the global left, the World Economic Forum, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and ultimately the program of Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street. By those three, he means groups in the financial sector that own a large percent of the stock market. I think it's 20 or 25% of the whole stock market falls under these major funds, Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street. Their agenda is dictated by the financial oligarchy that controls humanity to the detriment of the people. An elite that operates not only in the United States, but also in Canada, Australia, Europe, and wherever politics is held hostage by their investment funds and their pseudo-humanitarian organizations dedicated to the obliteration of Western civilization. let's keep the text here. But any reaction right there, Father?
No, but I agree. It's just I don't know what to say. He's saying everything that I believe. Yes, and I do believe that there are people who want the end, the literal end of Western civilization, and they're working very hard to get that. And I think
Yeah,
they're doing it through political means. Yes.
and right now we're still not evident to all of us how far they're going. But this is the thing: we're not going to have fathers and mothers in families. They're calling parent one and parent
Well,
two.
they're changing everything. They're
Yeah,
changing everything, and they detest everything that's Christian because that is what Western civilization is built upon. Christianity.
right.
That has to go.
So
So there's a war going on between the those who believe and those who believe not.
yeah, and then there are the three: you, me, and Matt Gaspers, our producer, are standing in defense of the West because we believe that it is the most beautiful civilization in its essential lines that humanity has ever produced, and the freest.
There is no question of that either. I do believe that. Yes.
All right, so behind, and I think we're more than halfway through now, I'm not sure, but behind these people, by now we should know this, are people devoted to evil, united by the satanic hatred against our Lord Jesus Christ and those who believe in him, mainly against the Catholic faithful. We want Christ to reign, and we proclaim it with pride. Christ is King. They want the Antichrist to reign, whose tyranny is made of chaos, war, disease, famine, death. And the more emergencies and crises planned and created by the globalist elite increase, the more that elite has a pretext to impose new limitations, new restrictions of fundamental rights, and new social controls. So his vision is that a lot that is happening that is creating crises is intentional in order to bring greater limitations on our freedom.
Absolutely.
And Joe Biden, he continues, the current president, he puts in quotes, is a servant of this subversive elite. And why blackmailable? That's a sad thought that our president is being blackmailed, or maybe, for the scandals and crimes committed by himself personally, also by his family, beginning with his son Hunter. And she puts vice president in quotes again. I guess in some way, maybe still saying that the election in 2020 wasn't fully illegitimate.
Hinting at it anyway. Yes.
His vice president, Kamala Harris, is equally subservient to the same deep state. And the Democratic Party, to which they both belong, is the expression of the woke ideology that plagues all the parties of the global left. All right, we're getting now to the final paragraphs. Candidate Donald J. Trump, while certainly taking some serious critical positions that a Catholic cannot agree with. Okay, so there he does say Trump is not perfect. In fact, far from it. The Catholic can't even agree with some of his positions.
I think a lot of us figured that out before we began this letter.
Okay. Represents for us, dear American faithful, in this specific historical moment, and he puts the rest in bold, the only possible choice to counter the globalist coup that the woke left is about to implement definitively, irreparably, and with incalculable damage for future generations. So the view of the Archbishop is this election is a capstone on a multi-year, multi-decade project to install a type of civilization which would be a type of slavery, a type of control by an ideology that is unchristian. Sorry about that, Father. You okay? Voting for Donald Trump.
I'll make it. Go ahead.
Voting for Donald Trump means firmly distancing ourselves from an anti-Catholic, anti-Christian, and anti-human vision of society. It means stopping those who want to create a hellish dystopia Dystopia is the opposite of utopia. Utopia is a land where things are wonderful, and dystopia is a land where things are terrible. To create a hellish dystopia that is even worse than the one announced by George Orwell. He's referring to 1984, a society that was entirely totalitarian, and a figure named Big Brother.
And/or Animal Farm.
And/or Animal Farm, yeah. He describes how these things operate.
Yep.
And it also means, do not forget, giving him our vote of confidence so that President Trump knows that the massive vote of Catholics and Christians that brought him back to the White House, and he puts this in boldface, must become the premise for a more incisive commitment to the defense of life, from conception to natural death, the traditional family, the right of parents to educate their children, and to the defense of the Christian faith and the cultural identity of the nation. Those last things are evidently issues where Donald Trump hasn't been very strong, or he hasn't really been favorable to them. But because the Archbishop is saying, if he sees that the vote came from the Christian people, he will be bound to take a different view of these last issues. Am I correct, Father?
I think so. I also think that we talked about this a couple sessions back. I also think that in this particular, on these particular topics, Trump is playing more the politician. I don't know that he really believes all of this, but he needs votes. It'll be interesting to see after he wins, God willing, how he modifies this or changes this a little bit. But I think he's going to.
I understand.
That's
So
my
you're
personal
saying,
belief.
so you're saying even the fact that he has taken positions here on these matters that some Christians can't agree with, you think it's a tactical decision on his part to try to gain votes from
I
that
think
side.
he needs votes, and he knows that the left is vehement on the sacrifice necessary for the sacrifice of children on the altar of Moloch. He understands that they're not giving up on this, and they're very strong on that. It's for a lot of reasons. We can see that in future episodes that we have, but I think Trump wanted to separate himself from being put into a box by the left, and showing a little bit more leeway. And I believe that's a political decision. I don't believe that it's heartfelt. I believe what is heartfelt was his position during his first term.
Okay.
He spoke quite clearly then.
All right. Let's go back to the text.
You've got the point is to lead. The point is that to lead and to be a vehicle of change, you have to win first.
Okay.
And I believe that's what he's gearing up to do, to win first.
Yeah, and I think what we're doing is almost unique. I don't know that anyone has read this letter word for word so carefully. So this little video here can be recommended to other people if they feel that there's someone who could see this and gain an insight into all the issues that are at stake. This video would be good for people to see. But he goes on and says, I repeat, the choice is between a conservative president who is paying with his very life, he's referring to the assassination attempts, for his fight against the deep state. And of course, God help us if something would happen to him even now, just before the election. And an infernal monster.
God forbid.
An infernal monster who obeys Satan. Pretty harsh words. I'm not sure. But the Archbishop doesn't pull punches. So let's read on. For a Catholic, there can be no question. Voting for Kamala Harris is morally inadmissible and constitutes a very grave sin. Nor is it morally possible to abstain. Because, and he puts in boldface, in this war, declaring oneself neutral means allying oneself with the enemy. And we're down to the last few paragraphs here. People around the world are beginning to understand the threat that looms over them and their children's future, and you Americans, says the Italian Archbishop, have understood it too. But even if this time it will be more difficult for the deep state to repeat the fraud of 2020, so he's saying that he believes there was a fraudulent election, you must not think that it will resign itself to defeat so easily. So he's warning about this election as well. Let us therefore prepare to prevent possible attacks and civil war scenarios from being used to impose martial law and new restrictions after the attempts on his life from which President Trump providentially escaped. So he then writes, Archbishop Viganò writes to the American people, and this is the last three paragraphs. You see, it ends there at the bottom. Let us not forget, dear faithful, that human energies alone are powerless in the face of this infernal display of forces. We proclaim that Christ is King. This means that our Lord must return to reign. And the first way to make him reign is by obeying his holy law and living in his grace. Let Christ reign in your hearts, in your families, in your communities, and throughout the entire United States of America. This is the only way to peace, harmony, and prosperity for your nation. So a real call to everyone to live their own lives, not just go to vote, but to be fully living the Christian life and be full Christian citizens.
But what His Excellency always saying, he's one step beyond that, Robert, I think. Because he's saying not only is Jesus Christ the only way, let me repeat that, the only way to the Father, because Christ himself said that, but Jesus Christ is the only way to happiness on this earth. And for a nation that's so civilized and based on Christianity, Christ and Christian principles have to be rediscovered, reinvigorated. They just have to be. For this to continue, that was built on Jesus Christ and was built on biblical principles and on moral principles, Christian moral principles, we have to get back to that if we're going to save the nation. I think he's saying it both ways. Christ is the only way to the Father. Christ is the only way to peace and communion in our communities and our families in the United States of America.
Thank you, Father Murr. That's very true. I agree with you. And so we come to the end of the letter of Archbishop Viganò, an open letter to the American people, particularly to Christians and to Catholics. Think of how many of you Catholics there are in the United States. Of course, we're excess of 60 million, I think maybe 70 or more million, which is more than 20% of the vote. And if everyone voted, because many people don't vote, it would be the equivalent of perhaps a third of the entire vote. Okay, think of how many of you Catholics there are in the United States. Vote without hesitation and pray that our Lord will enlighten American citizens in making their choice and grant victory to those who at least have no problem proclaiming that Christ is Lord. That little video clip that we showed. May God bless you all.
Yes.
And may the Virgin of Guadalupe, she who is the patroness of the United States and of all the Americas, and Saint Michael the Archangel protect you. Carlo Maria Viganò, Archbishop, former Apostolic Nuncio to the United States of America, October 22nd, yesterday, 2024. Father Murr.
What? What should I say? Don't ask me a question, Father Murr. What is that? All right, here's Father Murr's take. Father Murr listened to all of that. Very, very much in agreement with it. A couple of things I found a little bit exaggerated, but they were exaggerated in the right direction, right? At least I'll give him that. I think the if you want to get right down to the roots of the problem or this situation is this. This is the most decisive election. I was going to say in our lifetime, but it's not. I don't believe so. I know a little bit about history, world history, European history, and American history. I think this is the most important, decisive election in the history of the United States of America, not just in my lifetime, in the history of our nation. The nation is either going with God or it's going against God. It's really that simple. And I don't think it's ever been as clear as it has been right now. Even 10 years ago, there was some wiggle room, right? On things you could back and forth. There isn't anymore. It's becoming absolutely stark naked clear. Good and evil. You have to vote for what's good. Also, there's another thing too. There are a number of people who are planning on not voting as the morally correct thing to do. I disagree with that completely. I do not believe that is morally correct at all, especially right now where every vote counts. I don't believe that that's a morally acceptable alternative not to vote and to be happy with yourself that you've done something correct. No, it's not correct. We need to be heard. And you have to choose the lesser of two evils. It's very simple. Thomas Aquinas teaches this. Aristotle teaches it. Everybody teaches it. It just makes sense. You're never going to find, as I said at the beginning of the program, the perfect candidate. The perfect candidate is our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and he's not running. It's that simple. So you've got to find with warts and all, flawed men. Yes, flawed men. And God always uses flawed men for his purposes, always. And I think we've got a fantastic, a flawed man who is also a fantastic man in the running. And I think he's committed. I think he's committed to the things of Christ. I'd like to see him more committed, but he's committed enough.
Okay, so just to summarize, and we'll have to be ending this quite soon. So people, you don't have to put up with us for too much longer. But we are at a turning point. The fact that the Archbishop, Patricia Matthews writes, there is a clear choice in this election. No one is perfect. And of course, partly she means Donald Trump is not perfect. And I don't know that anyone would say that he is. Would you say he's perfect?
Donald Trump would not say that Donald Trump is perfect. Right. Come on. Let's get real.
So everyone knows that he was he built casinos. He was in the land construction business in New York City.
He's been married. He's been married several times and had other relationships. We understand that. We understand all of that. Yeah, I look back in the Old Testament on King David. Look at him, and that was the one that God chose to help him out in forming a people and putting Israel together. Yep. These are all flawed characters. Constantine was a flawed character. Everybody.
So John B. says Trump is like another Constantine the Great, as Constantine was nasty but did more for the church and only converted on his deathbed. So I have a couple of comments. First, Trump has said things recently. He's put the St. Michael prayer up on his Twitter account, and he's suggested he's married to a Catholic, Melania, and somehow he seems, I think, to be going through as he's getting into his late 70s, a type of spiritual evolution himself. The second thing I would say, Archbishop Viganò is Italian, so he's looking at America from outside, and what he tells us is that it's important what we do, because the rest of the world has been looking toward America for several decades. And if we go woke, and if we follow the kind of leftist leadership that the Europeans have had, and that was once in the Soviet Union, which was communism, and if this woke culture is totalitarian, as Bobby Kennedy Jr. told us in the speech that he gave when he handed his votes over to Trump in such a surprising way for a man from a Democratic Party candidate, he said we're in danger. But Viganò from outside the country says from the rest of the world's perspective, what happens in America is somehow of critical importance for the entire future of the world. So that's how I see the election myself. And we've got some here we have St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our defense against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly hosts, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen.
And on that beautiful note, Robert, I suggest we end.
Okay. Thank you, Father. God bless America.